Mr. Lucy, do we have you on? Chairman Lucy, do we have you on? Okay. Mr. Lucy is joining the meeting, I believe, now. There we go. Chairman Lucy is joining.
Lori, this is Ann. I have to step out for a minute to take a call from the governor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chairman Lucy, are you with us?
Yes, do you have me?
I do. I can hear. There we go. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
All right. It is 10:03. I am a little late. I apologize due to technical difficulty. It looks like we've got a number of individuals here present. It looks like we've got disturbance keels. Yep, we've got everybody. All right. So good morning. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the, well, this is a special meeting of the Board of Directors for the Reno Sparks Convention Visitors Authority. I'm your chairman, Bob Lucy. With that, being that this is a special Zoom meeting, we are recording this live for those that are joining us. And I will have Corey Carlson, will you please call, our clerk of the meeting, will you please call roll?
Mr. Caraselli?
Here.
Mr. Chapman?
Here.
Mr. Kornstein?
Present.
Ms. Keel,
Here.
Mr. Lawson,
Here.
Mr. Lucy,
Here.
Mayor Sheevy,
Yes, here.
Ms. Silver stepped out, Mr. Sturbins.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Oh, thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. All right. Being that this is a Zoom meeting, we have allowed the public to submit public comment to the clerk prior to the meeting. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment that has been submitted to us?
I have no public comment at this time.
Okay, great. Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board. At this time, we are on to the approval of the agenda of the April 30th, 2020 Board of Directors special meeting agenda. Are there any changes that any board members at this time would like to make or alter at this stage? Or looking for a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Mark Sturbins to approve.
I have a motion from Mark Sturbins.
Second, Ed Lawson.
I have a second from Ed Lawson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. We are on to item D, which is the approval of the minutes for the April 3rd, 2020 Board of Directors special meeting. Looking for a motion if there is no changes needed to be made.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion from Don Cornstein,
Second,
Mark,
Ann Silver.
second from Ann Silver. All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. I know this is difficult to run these meetings via Zoom, but I do appreciate everybody being flexible through this process. All right, we are on to item E1. This is board matters. This is a report from the Finance Committee regarding action taken in regards to contingency operations plan, cost-cutting measures, and staff reductions and budget revisions for fiscal year 2020 and 2021 for the Reno Sparks Convention Visitors Authority. And with that, I will let Mr. Chisel, you were a part of that meeting, or do we want to turn that over to Ed Lawson, who is the chair of the committee? Mr. Lawson, Vice Chair Lawson.
Let's let Robert start off, and then I'll have some comments at the end.
Okay. Mr. Chisel, if you can give us the updates from the Finance Committee and that finance meeting, sir.
Robert Chisel for the record. As you all know, beginning with the COVID issue back in March, the RSCVA immediately reduced, canceled, analyzed, renegotiated all our expenditures, resulting in an elimination of about $7.8 million from our 4-month budget, 60% reduction in that period of time. In addition, the Finance Committee was looking at additional cuts, particularly in the payroll area of our operations. During the Finance Committee meeting, staff presented a couple of options to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee recommended to the board and approved a furlough and early retirement incentive for employees. Basically, in a nutshell, we are going from 55 full-time employees down to 29 employees is the current count. We are going to be furloughing 25 positions. 20 of them are filled. And in addition, one has above and beyond has taken the early retirement option. So we're down to 29 employees with the RSCVA. This will save us about $220,000 a month in operating payroll cash during that time. The employees will be on furlough, so their health insurance will continue per the contract with our health insurance provider. The health insurance will continue for 120 days. And the furlough is effective for the preponderance of them tomorrow, May 1st. There are a number that are finishing up projects that will be furloughed in the coming weeks as those projects complete. Did I summarize okay, Mr. Lawson?
Yep, that was well done.
Can I just point out, Ed, that you look like a midget next to your motorcycles?
Yeah.
I mean, in the time of this pandemic, I'm looking for every little bit of happiness in my life, and that gives me a lot of joy right now.
I have a question.
That
Mr.
make
Chair?
me very happy.
Okay, hold on. And Ms. Silver, you have a question, you said?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards to Mr. Chisel's report, are we talking about 25 layoffs or 25 furloughs? There is a distinction.
There is 25 furloughs and one that, in addition, one that was not on the furlough list is taking the early retirement option. So that's why we're down to 29. And also, I neglected to also mention that the remaining employees will all be taking a 10% pay cut. And the executive management staff is taking a 15% pay cut. Effective tomorrow, May 1st, or May 2nd, actually, it'll be effective.
Mr. Chair, if I just might ask for further clarification.
Please.
Furlough means you are giving them the opportunity to return as opposed to severing them from the organization?
That is correct. The intent is that when things turn around, we will be able to bring them back. As we move through this pandemic, there's a lot of unknowns, and we'll see where the future brings us. But they are still able to get unemployment and apply for unemployment, so they will be receiving that if they so choose.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silver. All right, Mr. Lawson, Vice Chair Lawson, you, floor is yours, sir.
Just quickly, I want to say, this is never fun. This is hard decisions. And I want to thank the executive staff for working with us on the finance committee. We take no great pleasure in furloughing people, but at the end of the day, we got to make sure that our organization is solvent and we're going to be in business. So I want to just say thank you especially to Robert and Jennifer and Mike for working so hard to make this happen.
All right. Anything else for the board that we need to know in regards to the actions taken by your committee for the finance that would be relevant?
Yeah, Chairman,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Madam Mayor.
Good morning. Question, can you tell me what departments those were? Did you already go through that? I didn't see it.
No, I don't think they did they did describe that. Can you clarify that for us, Mr. Chisel or Miss Cunningham?
Because I think the board should have an idea of the structure that's still in place or where we're sort of going. I mean, I don't know, was that sales where, I think sales is going to be critical. So I kind of need a little bit of background of what that looks like. Thanks so much.
Agreed. So can we provide some clarity to that, Ms. Cunningham or Mr. Chisel?
Certainly. Without naming names at this point, every single department from our mailroom to our finance department, to the IT department, to marketing, to convention sales, to tourism sales, have had individuals that have been furloughed in their department. The convention sales department is the largest department, so therefore we were all about 50%. So we're operating on
So were you just,
shoestring.
thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate. Were you just, kind of give me a picture of how you decided about that? It was just kind of across the board, or, was there some strategy here? I kind of like to know, what the executive team kind of thinks moving forward so that, we're keeping all the key ingredients in place. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll speak to that. And then if Mr. Chisel or Mr. Larraguetta have additional things to input. We, as directed by last board meeting, we sat down with Ann Silver and went through name by name in the organizational chart in each of our departments. And we discussed if we could, if they could be a candidate to be furloughed, if they were, we felt that everyone is essential to our business, but could we operate without them during this crisis time period when the casinos are not open and we're kind of just trying to do as much as we can to contribute to reduction in payroll, in expenses. That's on top of the 7.8 million that we cut from our budget. It was a very hard exercise, and I am appreciative that Ann Silver was able to participate with us because she asked some tough questions, and as a team, we went through and made the painful decisions as a team. Anyone else?
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted some background, how you kind of came up with, it's never easy. It is so hard. So I just, I'm so sorry. That is just, it's really, really difficult. I mean, I'm sure that was very, very tough on you. So thank you, Jennifer. I'm sorry.
I'm going to make a last comment too. Monday was a very difficult day for all of us, and obviously staff. We did not set out with the fact that we were going to be reducing each department by 50%. That was not even in our mind as we went through the list of employees. And surprisingly, that's basically how it turned out. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Larragetta, if I could just add to that.
Please.
For the record, Mike Larragetta, Madam Mayor, you specifically asked for numbers, so I'd be happy to share with that. And just to echo Ms. Cunningham's comments, yes, we went through department by department and looked at which positions we felt were essentially critical to remain on staff during this pandemic, and what we felt needed was essential as we emerge from this crisis. As it specifically relates to sales in terms of numbers, the sales department represented 27 employees in the organization, and what we submitted to the finance committee and what was approved reduced us to an FTE count of 13. So 13 of the 29, so approximately 45% of the remaining staff. So just to give you the specific details of our numbers in the sales department.
Okay.
And they're not all salespeople that we kept. We had to keep some administrative processing people as well. So
I guess my only concern, and you guys know your department's the best. And so I'm not trying to second guess your jobs and how you do that and what you do, but I am going to say, I mean, I just feel like this is the time to hustle in sales, hustle, hustle, hustle. You guys know that. I mean, anyone in sales, right? And because think about it, there are going to be so many conventions out there that are going to, especially in Las Vegas, I would imagine, that we could pick up that low-lying fruit because they can't get back in on another date. So that's all I'm saying. I just, I worry a little bit because I think, there's part of the machine that has to keep working and working and working. And that's, and those pieces are really, really important because that's your bread and butter. So that's all I'm saying. So I just really wanted some clarity, and I'm not going to try to second guess you, but that's how I feel about sales. They're pretty critical. So thanks so much. Sorry.
I agree with the mayor, and I feel like maybe that could be the department would be more of like the first ones we bring back as a possibility if we do like a phased approach. Because I agree, the sales department, without knowing their productivity or anything within the organization, sales is extremely important right now.
And as we bring people back, it will be a decision. Mr. Larragetta, Mr. Chisholm, myself will be getting together as business levels improve, and we will talk about who we will bring back one at a time. So thank you.
All right. Any other comment in regards to this discussion?
Lucy?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Andy Chapman for the record. I just want to say, being a member of the committee that went through this with Don and Mike, there was a lot of discussion. I mean, working with staff for sure, and as many of us have said, hard decisions. But we did talk quite a bit about that sales structure, and, you know, the need to be able to respond and be back in the marketplace. And I know that Jennifer, Mike, and the whole team there looked at that with individuals that I know we're not talking individual names or positions at this point, but it was a big conversation and had a lot of back and forth about where do we need to be when we get out of this pandemic, and some robust discussion around that. So I would definitely support, you know, as we start looking at this and seeing the return of business, and be ready and prepared for those opportunities to bring some of these folks back at that time, because that's going to be where we initially get our most bang for the buck. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman, and I appreciate your continued service on that board. And I want to point out, you know, Mr. Sturbins, Mr. Chapman, Mr. Kornstein, and Vice Chair Lawson, and their continued effort to stand up the Finance Committee with Ms. Cunningham, Mr. Larraguetta, and Mr. Chisel to identify the needs of our organization. These are trying times for many of us, and we are trying to navigate waters we've never navigated before. Even in recession periods, this is nothing like we have ever seen, to completely shut down a national economy on this level. To talk to sales organizers, you know, and convention organizers, and try to entice them to come here when you have little to no air service, no availability of hotel rooms, convention space being utilized in different manners for public health safety. This is a challenging time, and we don't know. There's a lot of unknowns out there still for us. I know the mayor, the vice chair of and Mayor Pro Tem of Sparks, and myself have been diligently working on these issues on the front line, and we don't even know what those timelines look like. So as we continue to work through these issues and identify them, realizing that 40% of our state's industry and a good chunk of our local industry is based around tourism, we are going to do everything we can to bring our economy back online as soon as possible, but we have to do that in a safe and measured, balanced way before we can just run right into this. And we have to provide consumer confidence for a number of those individuals out there before we can just jump right into the pool. So I appreciate all the work that the Finance Committee and executive staff has done with this. We have given the Executive Committee full power to make those actions without full board support through our last board meeting. So this is really an update from the Finance Committee to the board as a whole. If the board has any other discussions or comments they'd like to make on these actions that the committee has to give them further direction going forward, this committee will meet every 2 weeks until we adjust that. So is there any other discussion before we move on?
Yeah, Chairman, I just want to say really quickly, I appreciate the background. I think it's really helpful of how we sort of come up with these ideas and strategies. And the reason I'm going to say that is all of us this is our new normal of living in Zoom and getting on board meetings. And every organization that I'm involved with is unfortunately having to do this. But some have different strategies than others. And I've seen some are just like, okay, we're going to cut across the board because we think that's the best and most fair way to do it. So I really appreciate the background. I appreciate the board and their hard work and you know, making the right strategy for what they think is important. So I do appreciate that. So I just want the board to know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any other discussion at this time?
Mr. Chair, I have one last question.
Ms. Silver.
Mr. Chisel mentioned that $220,000 will be saved per month by furloughing these individuals. On top of that, is a 10% reduction in salary meaningful from a financial standpoint, or is it just further demoralizing the people left behind?
Mr. Chisel, can you respond to that?
Well, I in some way, you know, I got to say that speaking for my own department, and I know the other departments are this way too, the individuals left are taking on quite a bit of additional duties above and beyond what they were doing before. I am very proud of our team. Nobody has been, I haven't gotten any grousing or complaining. They're all jumping in and trying to help wherever they can. They're a great group. This is a great team. And unfortunately, we are having to take that 10-15% cut. It is hurting for a lot of people, but that was the determination of the Finance Committee, and we are going forward with that.
You know, and Ms. Silver, I want to add a little bit too, and obviously through the discussions that I have had with Mr. Chisel, the Vice Chair, and the Executive Director, we understand that there are some bond issues out there that the county backs for the RSCVA, that the Washoe County Board of Commissioners, I will put on our agenda for future to put up some relief for those individuals so that we can free up those dollars. I think every cost saving initiative we can do, because we are looking at, as you know very well, as you and I have had many conversations and talked with our federal delegation, that we're looking at an 18-month potential recovery period. And with casinos potentially at the earliest, maybe if all things go as perfectly as possible, opening June 1st. Once again, you still have to build consumer confidence. You have to build a number of different things that will, and air service, and there are quite a bit of recovery period for us. So before, and as we know at the RSCVA, we have a 3 to 4 month lag period when we do room tax collection and how that is calculated. You know, so everything that happens for us, we are absolutely at the very end from the RSCVA standpoint for collection and stand up. So we have to make every penny last, in my opinion, as long as possible. And so even a 10% cut, even though that may be demoralizing for some employees, and I understand that, we have to tighten those belts at this time, being that we will get through this and that there will be jobs on the other end. And we will hopefully be able to, those individuals that we're able to retain will help keep the organization going so that the others that we have furloughed will have jobs on the other end instead of worst case scenario, which is a total decompartmentalization of the RSCVA.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate your comments. Then based on that 10%, I think from an optics standpoint and a commitment from the board standpoint, I would recommend that we waive our $80 a board stipend that we're receiving and give that.
I don't disagree with that. And I think those should be discontinued for the time being for all board meetings. Look, I think most of us are doing public service to do public service and not to get an $80 stipend. And so I would absolutely forego my stipend that there's no bearing on my life whatsoever, and I'm happy to participate.
I would make that recommendation that we all agree to forego that stipend for as long as we're asking these employees to not only pick up additional work, but take a 10% pay cut.
I agree with that. If we need a motion to make that formal.
Well, I think it's recommendation to I think really what this is, Mr. Kornstein, is a recommendation to the Finance Committee. And as we've given you the empower the Finance Committee to make those decisions, I think that is something that at your next Finance Committee that you guys can make a realization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Chairman
Any further comments?
Yeah, Chairman Lucy.
Yes.
Andy Chapman for the record. I think also one element that we can have further discussion at the committee level, which we did, was also, you know, how do we look at some type of a reimbursement process at the end of this? You know, we've asked these employees to kind of take this hit, you know, and is there a way to kind of get that back in their pocket, so to speak, when we start coming out of that? So I would like the committee to have that further discussion as well, that, you know, once we kind of come out and we see some revenues coming back and we're returning to somewhat normal, whatever the new normal will be, that we have an opportunity to make good for these folks. Because I agree with Mr. Chisel that we are asking the remaining employees to carry a hefty burden. And I think that we ought to be looking at ways of compensating that when we get to the end. So it could be.
So from my standpoint, and this is just my opinion and recommendation to the Finance Board, I don't disagree that a number of those employees that have stayed on are going to have to work a significantly amount harder during this period of time. But during that period, I would recommend that we move it towards some sort of a year-end bonus if we have that. But I would say that would not be in fiscal year 2021. That might be in fiscal year 21, 22, realistically. I understand their commitment and dedication, but like I continue to tell my employees that we have to band tight to get through this, and that we're very lucky to still be employed at this point, and realize that we are trying to work to keep our friends and other people employed down the road. I would also discuss that some of those individuals that have been furloughed are getting unemployment, you know, to double dip and to really put tax dollars towards. Is a discussion that, you know, that I always, it's dicey to have, but we can have that discussion. But once again, right now I'm in the midst of recovery. And so to talk about something down the road until we know what recovery looks like is really difficult for me, in my opinion.
Just one last comment from me, Bob, Ed Lawson here, is I thought it was important that we all share in the pain, because if you're working at a casino right now and you're in upper management, a 50% reduction, and lower management, people like my wife have taken a 25% reduction. So I think the optics were, you know, we are doing everything we can to preserve the tax dollars from the casinos and what they generate. So I think the optics part of it is probably more important than the dollar amount, and because casinos have been just decimated as far as employees, and trying to start up for June 1 for them is going to be a monumental task. So I still want to say thanks to the staff and what they've done. I know it's not easy, and it's not easy. It wasn't easy for me to make this decision, but you know, it had to be done. So thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Yes, go ahead.
If I could, Ben Kennedy, if I could weigh in on the $80 stipend. I don't have it here in front of me, but I believe it's mandated by statute or reg. So I don't know that the finance committee could take action to disallow the $80 stipend per meeting, but board members are free to waive that. So if board members want to reach out to executive staff and decline to accept that, I think that's the proper avenue, because I don't know that we could take action to disallow it because it's in statute.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So I think
Chairman Lucy,
yes, go ahead.
this is Board Clerk. I see that Ms. Keels has her hand raised for comment, and Mr. Chapman.
All right, Ms. Keel.
Sorry, disregard. That was from a long time ago.
Okay, and Mr. Chapman, do you have any comments?
No, sorry, that was from before.
You know, and what we'll do is, you know, for all the board members, we're going to, you don't have to raise your hands. We're going to try to keep this as free flowing. I know most of your voices, so I will stop and call on you as you start talking, and try to mitigate and direct this as best I can. Okay, moving on. I think unless there's any further discussion on the Finance Committee's direction, and we will move on. I think they've got enough direction from us. There's no need for a motion. They have been given power by the board to make decisions unilaterally. So we're on to, in my opinion, we're on to item E2, unless there's any opposition. Item E2 is a review, discussion, and possible approval of a payment in the amount of up to $100,000 to the City of Reno for funding to the Downtown Business Improvement District. Prior to moving into this discussion, I want to make full disclosure that I do sit on the board of the Reno Downtown Improvement District as a member from the Washoe County Commission. I do act on that executive committee and serve on that board. So that is full disclosure going into this. So I know we have a number of members of the chair and vice chair, Chairwoman Cindy Carano from the Reno Business Improvement District. And we also have Vice Chair Partoles with us today. I know there is Chief Soto, our acting manager, Chief Soto, and also, I believe, Assistant Chief. I saw him earlier, but he's not here now. So with that, I will turn this over to Cindy Carano. I know Alex Tatinsky is medically laid up and could not join us today. So with that, Chairwoman Carano, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Chairman Lucy, excuse me. This is Board Clerk Corey Carlson. We have a short video, Cindy, I apologize. We have a short video from Mr. Tatinsky that we'd like to show. I will mute everybody at that time. Once that video is over, we will open the floor for questions.
That's
Okay.
exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, so let's play the video. We'll play the video first, and we'll turn it over then to Chairwoman Carano at that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Satinsky. I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Reno Partnership, and my apologies that I can't be here myself. I had shoulder surgery earlier this week, and hopefully I'm at home right now recovering while you're watching this. Cindy and Par are here, though, to answer any questions you may have after this presentation. Let's get started with the Ambassador Program. It has been very successful. Here are some of the numbers. They have done so much to keep downtown clean, safe, and friendly, made a visual difference to downtown with graffiti removed, with shopping carts recovered and brought back to the stores where they came from, with plenty of wellness checks of people that look like they're not doing so well, greeting visitors every day, giving them visitor guides and all kinds of collateral that we actually receive from RSCVA. We also deal with a lot of nuisance issues. Since January 2020, we have received 400 calls. These nuisance calls are calls that we take off of the police's plate so that they are free to focus on bigger crimes. That has resulted in a reduction of nuisance-related crime in downtown Reno by almost 50% in 2019. Where other areas stayed pretty flat. Of course, COVID-19 made a big difference and shifted the ambassador's focus more on safety and the management of the homeless community, which moved closer into downtown, with the shelter being moved to the event center now. Long lines in front of it every evening that the ambassadors are managing. They're passing out flyers that educate them about what the coronavirus is and how to protect themselves and help prevent the spread. In the back of the flyer is a map of all 13 mobile bathrooms that were established throughout downtown. They also disinfect and wipe down all kinds of street furniture, poles, doorknobs, buttons for traffic lights, anything that the public would touch, and they are passing out water throughout the day. We do have a marketing program. I just want to glance over it so that you don't forget that we have one. The last 30 days, we were very proactive, creating pages that are helpful to our community, including a curbside takeout list, a church services list in our area. We received 15 mentions in media. Most of them, of course, covered what the ambassadors have been doing to support the community under the COVID-19 stress that we're going through. Downtownreno.org/COVID is our resource page that we update on a daily basis with information for consumers as well as businesses. We have an economic development department, which is fairly new. We started this year and have produced great results so far. We were able to finish a UNR student and faculty survey. Over 1,600 individuals have participated. We are still looking at the results and make that survey available shortly. We also have a property inventory database of vacancies, whether they're listed publicly or not. We want to have sure that we have a complete list of vacancies that we provide to anybody that's interested in coming to downtown. Main Street America, we are part of. They awarded us a grant last year with which we were able to purchase 12 bike racks that we put throughout downtown. And we also created a brochure and mailed it to over 4,000 addresses to educate people on what the bid is doing. What I like very much is our downtown development map. And that is an interactive map on our website that shows you at a glance all the development that is going on in downtown and the various stages that they're in. So it's a great tool for anybody who is interested in coming to downtown to educate themselves. What I want to add in this context is we're in close contact with our developers throughout the year. CAI, for example, shared with us their plans for Harris. And they emphasized in their presentation that what they've observed, the change in downtown that has become cleaner, safer, more managed through the ambassadors, made a big difference and was a deciding factor for them when to come here and start this project here. Of course, during the pandemic, the focus has more shifted in economic development as well. We are now more of a technical resource for businesses in regards to federal relief programs and other things that people can take advantage of. We are now planning a recovery plan for downtown that is in sync with what our governor is trying to do. We want to make sure that we are a strong support for our businesses when everything opens up again. I want to thank RSCVA for its support last year, and I hope that this year we can count on your support again. I know it's hard times, everyone is hurting, but I hope that you recognize that the services that we're providing are so essential and so needed, especially with collaboration of our police department, to make sure that downtown stays managed when we open it back up again and have a really strong comeback. So thank you again for your time. And now I'm passing it on to Cindy and Par for any questions you may have.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So Chairman Lucy, I'd also like to say that Mayor Sheevy is on our executive committee, and Chief Soto, and I actually haven't had a discussion with Chief Soto regarding his, is he still on?
Yeah.
Okay. With his new position as interim city manager. We also have Deputy Chief Mac Venzon on the call, and he sits as a liaison with the police department on our board of directors. So we have, and Ann Silver's on our advisory board. Anybody else here on our board? So the good news is we have a very strong representation from the entire community, not just from downtown. I'm sure that you know that the history of our business improvement district was the special assessment district, and the city of Reno, and Mayor Sheevy, you can join in at any time. The city of Reno supplemented the police, and actually Par was chair of this SAD at the time, the police assessment district, with approximately $500,000 a year for several years. And then when we formed the business improvement district, we negotiated that number would come down to 250,000, I believe, and that the business improvement district would go out and raise $625,000 a year. We were very grateful that the RSCVA pledged for 3 years $100,000, and we did receive your $100,000 last year, and times were booming last year. We still have the gap for the downtown business improvement district's police budget, and we sitting here and listening to your finance discussion, not unlike the meetings that I've been in with the row for the last month, 5 weeks. Actually, we started about 8 weeks ago when we saw the decline in business and cancellations. I understand where we are, and I understand where you are, and I've sat on your board before. So I appreciate the work that you're doing right now. Yes, Mayor, please.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Cindy. I don't mean to cut you off.
I want you to.
Oh, okay. Okay. A couple of things. I guess, can you clarify, or someone clarify, I think you've got Par with you or something, that money actually goes directly to the police department. Am I right?
Yes.
Because I think people are under the impression it goes directly to the ambassadors, but there's a few things that I need to say. And I know it's uncomfortable and I know it's unpopular, but it needs to be said. Right now, it's been really challenging with our homeless population because, you know, we are sort of under this directive that we are not supposed to engage with them to reduce, you know, social contact. And so it's been really hard to reach out to them to help them get services and things that they need. And so I think that people need to understand that downtown really needs to have the support. And now more than ever, I know that we want to cut, and we were just talking about those things, but there's certain aspects of this that we cannot ignore, or else it will be very hard to get people to come back downtown, because it's looking very challenging. So I'm just going to plead with this board that we really have to support this initiative. I'm sure many of you have seen it all over the city. We're working on it with, you know, the hard work of Chief Soto and Chief Benson. But I would just implore this board to really understand that there are things that we cannot overlook if we're going to get tourism back. So, and I think public safety is going to be critical. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a perfect waylay into Chief Soto's presentation or talk.
Thank you, Ms. Carano. Chief Jason Soto with the Reno Police Department. I want to start this just by saying how empathetic I am to the RSCVA for the furloughs and all those employees. They're certainly in my thoughts, and I know those are really tough decisions to make. My presentation here is going to be brief, but it does tie into the ambassadors and the Reno Police Department and the downtown in general. Just to give your board an idea, for the past 3 or so years, as we all know, business has been pretty good. Calls for service at the Reno Police Department have gone up steadily, about 15% a year. Yet crime was either flat or it actually trended down a little bit. A lot of that is attributed to this process that we have in place in terms of a partnership with our downtown patrol, our downtown police officers that you see that you routinely see, you know, every single day, and then their working relationship with the ambassadors. And somebody touched on it a little bit earlier. I don't know who it was, but that relationship has gotten to be a little bit more refined, or actually a lot more refined in the past 12 months, to where we have our ambassadors handle things so that we can pick up on the higher profile crimes, the more dangerous individuals, the more dangerous locations that we have within this district. And that's a really important thing for all of you to keep in the back of your mind, especially as we start moving towards recovery. I know how devastating this has been on everybody, especially the downtown corridor, because that's where a lot of our entertainment is from. You know, the casino industry has been devastated by this COVID-19. But I also think that those are the areas that are going to start recovery before everything else. I mean, that's where the tourism is going to start, right? It's going to start back in those casinos. And I think it's important to have that presence. I think it's important to have our ambassadors for what we all know is a growing homeless problem. And we were starting to actually really have an impact on that with our ambassadors, our clean and safe team, a lot of the different programs that we had in place. And that was kind of taken aback once COVID-19 hit. But I also think that, you know, just in a lot of the conversations that I've had from executives across this nation, and some of the executives that are not even from this nation, you know, across the world, that our recovery, although it's going to be slow, it's going to start soon. And we have to start preparing for that. And I just want to say that I really support the ambassador program. I know all of you really support the ambassador program. There will be a huge hole there if we lose our coverage, as Mayor Sheevy said, in terms of less police presence or less ambassador presence in the downtown corridor. It's very scary for me to think about. And we're also thin on resources as it is, especially in the police department. There is not a lot of fat, so to speak, to trim to make sure that we maintain a safe downtown corridor. I have Deputy Chief Venzon on this phone call as well. He's been much more involved with the actual ambassador program, some of the expenses, some of the costs, and what that looks like. So I'm going to turn it over to him and see if he has any input that he wanted to give you. I just wanted all of you to know that I really appreciate you. I understand that we're all in very difficult positions right now. A lot of tough decisions have to be made. But as Mayor Sheevy said, public safety, those pieces are, once you lose those pieces, you're going to have a hard time bringing You know, we're all talking about this rebound. Everybody's waiting for us to reopen. We're going to have a really difficult time if we don't make sure that our patrons and our tourists, our tourism industry feels safe wherever they are, and not just safe by police presence, but by measures that are put into place to make sure that the spread of this disease doesn't get worse. And I think that ambassadors and the police department can help out on those ends as well as the city of Reno. So I thank you all for your time. If you have any specific questions for me, I'd be happy to answer any of them. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Benzon real quick and see if he had anything to add to the group. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. I don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, everybody covered it. The only thing that I was going to try to maybe reiterate or reemphasize, and I think the mayor spelled it out pretty well in item E1 when we were talking about budget, but when we rebound from this, and as we rebound from this, my concern is that we have downtown in a place from a cleanliness standpoint, from a safety standpoint, that we can make as good a rebound as we possibly could, that we can capitalize on some of the opportunity that may have come about with, 3 months of no conferences being held nationally. How do we attract those to Reno? And if we can't keep downtown back to where it was and we take 2 steps backwards, my concern is that rebound for us will be a lot slower. From a number standpoint, I'm happy to answer any questions as they come up. Chief, I know you have another meeting, so I'll open it up to the board and then be here to support whatever questions need to come about.
May I just reiterate one point? Is this $100,000 pledge from the RSCVA is for the year 2019-20, ending at June 30th. And so I'm not sure exactly how the police budget works, but the way my budget works is I would have already spent that monies. And so I'm wondering if the RSCVA will be able to fund this $100,000 before June 30th. And then going forward, 2021 will be the 3rd year of your pledge. Okay, open up to questions. And Par, are you still on the phone?
We have Par Coles, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I'm here.
Par, do you have anything you want to add at this time?
No, it would be repetitive or redundant if I did. I think Cindy and both chiefs said what I was feeling and stated the facts, and I would hate to see any of this partnership eroded at this point when the momentum is as good as it is. So I'm happy to answer questions along the way, but I don't have anything new to add.
All right, Par, I appreciate you, the commentary, and Chairwoman Cindy Carano, Interim Chief Soto, and Mac. We thank you guys all for that. And if I can give just a little bit of commentary, serving on this board for the last 2.5 years with these individuals and standing up this organization has been really a highlight of my career. I mean, this has really been, and I've said it from this board standpoint, Reno does serve as the what I believe is the front door to our community. Whether you're going to Reno, to Lake Tahoe, Sparks, you land in the city of Reno, and you usually stay at one of the 50% of our properties that reside in the downtown corridor. And when you talk about homeless, homeless doesn't lie any further than right with our Human Services Agency. And when I speak with our director, Amber Howell, continuously, she does sing the praises of the ambassadors and the work that they're doing from the Record Street and our continued involvement of the Our Place and getting these individuals that are maybe service resistant at the time into programs and to help alleviate their homelessness. And I think the last thing we need to do during a time of as we go into a time of decline is to turn our backs on those that are going to need it most. We're going to see more individuals that are individuals that were always on the brink, paycheck to paycheck, living in that now, in that reality of losing a job or losing a career or losing the ability to pay rent and provide for their family or put food on the table. Now, I'm not making the argument that RSCVA needs to become the new homeless support team, or we need to put money towards that. What I am saying though, however, is that if the problem of homelessness and the problem of a cleanliness of our downtown and the ability for tourism not to evolve again in our downtown corridor does not exist, it will make our recovery that much harder and that much longer until somebody stands up and, like the Downtown Reno Partnership does, to make that a reality. So what I am saying, I am not pleading one way or the other because I can't and I won't, but I am saying they do provide a strong benefit. They do provide a service that is like nothing else that we have seen in our downtown corridor for quite some time. And understanding what our financial restrictions are and that it does not provide direct benefit to all of our properties or all of our parts of our region that RSCVA covers, it still does provide a very, very prominent service to our community. So with that, I will open up for discussion for the entire board.
Chairman?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. I just want to really highlight Alex and Cindy and Par and the board, because they have done a phenomenal job. So I want to just thank you from the bottom of my heart. But I also want to, I know we've talked about the homeless aspect of it. So that's not the only other sort of situation that's happening down there. So I just want to clarify a little bit. Part of that also is really important to understand that we need all the eyes that we can get with so many closed businesses down there. I've heard it countless times from, you know, the small hairstylist that's on the river, and from her to the guy that has the recreation shop with these businesses being closed. You know, that's of great concern, and the ambassadors provide, you know, those extra eyes, but also watching over those people. And the reason they do is they've built and established relationships with those business owners. So they've become very close with them in working, you know, on the downtown, on our initiatives and our goals. The other thing is what I've also, I've heard it and I've seen it from the ambassadors, if they have done a tremendous job asking people to social distance. They've done a tremendous job cleaning downtown. I mean, they've really gone above and beyond. So I want to say thank you to Alex and the ambassadors, but I want people to know there's also, you know, other services that need to be taken care of down there besides, you know, some of the most challenging as well. Thanks.
I apologize. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody else? Any other commentary?
I do. I do, Chair. It's Don Kornstein. So I have a question regarding, you know, the request. Are there specific needs that the $100,000 would be earmarked for, or is this just going into a general budget, so to speak, and it's going to be spent as it's spent? I mean, understanding what was presented for what the various needs are.
Don, so from my understanding, the request has always been, the 100,000 has always been to provide for the gap funding for the Business Improvement District, which is to directly support the downtown Reno Police Department officers. There's 14 officers that we backfill and make sure that there is security for the ambassadors and our tourists in the downtown core.
Yes, sir. Exactly as Mayor Sheevy mentioned, these funds go directly to the city of Reno to the RPD. They do not go to the Business Improvement District. They are the gap funding for what the assessments are for the downtown properties. Have an assessment every year. The row pays approximately $500,000 to the Business Improvement District. The budget for the ambassadors is $725,000. The budget for the administration is $400,000. And the police is, I wish Jeff Limpert were on the phone, I forget, but we have $625,000 gap of what the assessments are to what we actually have to pay the police for the additional staff that the downtown core requires. And that was a 3-year agreement when we formed the Business Improvement District with the city of Reno to actually raise funds, the $625,000. It came from all different organizations, the RTC, the Renown made a 1-year pledge. They did not repledge for this year. Current year, 1920. The Row, Partolles, different small organizations, large organizations, the university, the St. Mary's, all different organizations pledged. So.
Cindy?
Yes, sir.
I'd love for Mac or Chief Soto to talk a little bit more specifically about how many officers that actually helps support. In my mind, Chief Soto, I think I had 14, but it would be helpful for the board to know the number.
Par, I'm happy to do that if you're okay with that, Chief, if that's good with you.
Sure, of course. Yep.
So a little bit of background, what we kind of was been alluded to is, when the special assessment district was downtown, it was a police special assessment district. It generated about 1.2 million in special assessments. Out of that, the city covered a little bit of that gap to the tune of about $400,000 or $500,000 to put 14 officers on bicycles in the downtown core, in addition to the patrol folks who are assigned in the downtown geographic area, but that's not necessarily just the downtown core. So that special assessment district put 14 officers in the downtown core. When the BID was formed, there was the gap that Cindy was referring to, the $600,000 gap. And that gap has been funded through participants like the RSCVA, like the Row, St. Mary's, that Cindy alluded to. So essentially it adds to, or it accompanies the team of officers that works around the clock, 7 days a week in the downtown district, which goes from the Spark City limits out to Keystone, north to the university, south to California, and puts 14 officers right in the core of downtown Reno, from basically, what's now the bid. And so that's the number of cops that are funded with the pledged, the 3-year pledge money. Now that money, the 1920 money that Cindy's referring to, has been baked into our current budget, our current year's budget, and obviously into next year's budget as we start to plan and figure out what we're going to do with next year's budget. Hopefully that helps, and if there's more, I'm happy to answer.
Is there any further discussion? Chairwoman Carano, do you have anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No, I'm just happy to take more questions.
All right. Any other questions from the board?
I do. I wanted to make a comment building on what you said, Bob. It's Don Kornstein.
Go ahead.
I think what's important is, because I'm hearing different feedback from people, why are we considering putting in $100,000 or some other number to the city of Reno when we're cutting staff? I think what people need to keep in mind, in my estimation, and I suggest we do, is coming out of this pandemic, if there wasn't concern before about health and safety, I can promise you the heightened focus on that is going to be hard for us to imagine. I know what we're going through at Caesars, the plans that we're having to make, the monies we're having to spend. And my feeling is, and Reno's had in the past a mixed reputation, not casting any aspersions on any particular area of the valley or the city. And we were building tremendous momentum, as was referenced here, about the last several years, how things have improved. The perception of Reno in northern Nevada has improved dramatically. I think if we don't take the money that is required to keep a clean, safe, and vibrant downtown, we're not going to need as many salespeople as we are hoping we're going to re-employ, because reputations with these conference planners, convention planners, et cetera, and now with social media, get around. And I can tell you, I live downtown and it is not exactly ideal. I mean, I think there's been a lot of improvement. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but with the, you know, preponderance of homeless people, and I like to walk by the river, take long walks there, and there are people camping out in the park there, literally with tents. I just think we need to understand that if we don't have the proper environment, we are not going to compete effectively in what I know is going to be an incredibly competitive environment to get these conventions and meetings back, because everybody is going to be reaching deep and cutting price in order to fill space. So whether we decide to give the full 100,000, whether we decide maybe we can give part of it now and maybe reassess at the beginning of June, maybe it's half now and we'll reassess in June. I just feel like we all need to understand that even though some of the constituents are not downtown, if we don't have a safe, vibrant downtown, it's going to affect everyone's business. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kornstein. I appreciate it.
Chairman Lucy?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Keel.
2 points. One is I'm wondering if we, and I think Don alluded to this a little bit, if we could give half now and half later. And then the second point would be, I know that, is there somewhere else within the budget that we can have this money come from? Obviously, the budget is being scrutinized aggressively right now. As an example, I know we talked about the special event funding, and I was looking over the notes from January or February, and you had suggested that the committee go through and look at all those special events that we were questioning, if it was a good time for us to continue to fund those. That's just one idea I'm throwing out, but can the money also come from another place in the budget?
And Shannon, to your discussion, I don't disagree. I think that is a conversation that I did have with the chairwoman and the executive director, Stastensky, that potentially we break up the payment in 2 separate payments over a period of time to backfill when we have a better opportunity. I am concerned about the special events, because those special events that maybe have already been canceled for the year, that were committed funding for, and events that may not go off this year because of the COVID-19 response. I think those are opportunities we can discuss. You know, it is a really difficult decision, because to short side a special event may prove to be damning, to the sense that they would never be able to recover from that. So those are discussions that I would hope that we have with Mr. Chisel and the Finance Committee to discuss what are the best viable options for us. But I would recommend to this board that we do split the payment. If there is support for the payment, that we split it in half, 50,000 now, and 50,000 6 months or 9 months from now, with upon recovery and the resuming of business within the downtown core.
Chairman Lucy?
Yes.
Understand that our 3-year is also next year. So RSCVA pledged $100,000 for next year as well. And so maybe kind of like how the mortgage companies are doing, is adding on to the end of the mortgage, maybe pledging into 21, 22. I do not understand how the police budget works, if that would work for them. Basically pay in arrears.
Cindy, and let me tell you, I understand budgets for cities and counties are very much that they are within the fiscal year. There is really no carryover. We do have those carryover abilities. Try not to do those carryover abilities. If it is not backfilled, or if it is not done within this fiscal year for the police department, it will have to come out of the City of Reno's general fund to backfill that. And so there will be challenges with that. Even if we were to provide funding later on, there could be ramifications by not making the full payment now that would have lasting effects on maybe not the police department, but other departments within the city of Reno, parks, i.e. special events, a number of other things that are very important to not only just the security of downtown, but special events through downtown once the reopening.
Chairman Lucy, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
What I'd like to suggest is that we approve the $50,000, 50% of the payment today, and that we, the finance committee works with the management to understand what flexibilities there might be in different buckets of money that exist. Because to me, this is an investment. This is not a variable cost that we had the ability to deal with the organizational structure. This is an investment in the community that we need to understand is critical if we're going to be competitive. Once a reputation shifts, I think everybody knew in Reno from years ago how hard it is to change a perception. And as I said, we are going to face enormous competition. And so I would like to see, in this way, we could still possibly make it before the end of June, the second payment, but let us see what flexibilities there are. And, maybe the Finance Committee could be authorized to make that decision, which I'm always comfortable, delegating authority, or if not, we can take it back up at the June board meeting for the RSCVA.
All right. Don, do you want to make that in the form of a motion?
I'd like to say yes, if we could just leave it that way. If you want me to repeat it.
No, we can leave it. No, it's been.
That's my motion. That's my motion.
All right. So as I understand it,
Commissioner,
I'll reiterate.
Sorry. I just want to understand, sorry to put you on the spot, Matt, but is this money been spent? Is this money that you need that you're going to require? Does the division of the payment affect the police?
From my understanding, Robert Chisel, and I'll have Robert chime in here, this money has not been spent. This money is still available in our budget, but would have to be reallocated and we would have to do some finance adjustments. But it has been always guaranteed because we did agree to the 3-year payment, but we've been making adjustments based upon the pandemic response.
This is Robert Chisel. The money was budgeted in this fiscal year. However, as a result of the COVID-19, it, along with other items, was swept out of the budget. It is no longer in the budget. We would have to find another place to take it from, and there is really very little left. As you can imagine, we wouldn't have just laid off about half of our staff if we had the ability, but we would have to search for another opportunity to take it from ending cash or some other option.
Thank you, Robert.
Chairman Lucy, I think that to Don's point, though, I think that committing to June, and maybe I misunderstood what Don was saying, so I apologize, but I don't think at this point we can commit to the end of June being the second payment. I think he had mentioned that maybe we would reevaluate in June. June's going to come real quick. You had mentioned 6 months, 9 months. I definitely think maybe by the end of the year is doable. But I think to your point, the more realistic way to go about it would be we commit to the 50, albeit I don't know where it's going to come from, to Chisel's point. And then the additional 50, we could say we could evaluate it in 4 months and bring it up on an agenda.
Yeah, Ms. Keel, I think what Don was suggesting was that it be taken up for discussion in June by the Finance Committee and not actually paid in June, but actually for discussion depending on what the outlook looks in June. I would recommend that we do push it out to the 6 months to the end of the year in December for reevaluation. That gives us time for recovery, times for still collection. And realize, we do have an in-fund balance that we could that we could cash into that we could look at, but we also are still collecting room tax from non-gaming properties. 32% of our room tax is being collected. Now that's only 32% of our budget. However, but it is 32%. We are collecting some dollars. Now I look at most of my financial individuals that are scratching their heads saying that we cannot live on 32%. I don't disagree with that. However, but this is as Dawn pointed out, this is an investment, and you figure out unique ways to make a penny stretch in times like this until recovery comes back around. And from every economist that I've been on the phone with, that recovery will be quick. Hopefully, when it comes, we don't know where tourism lies within that recovery. I think it's not at the forefront. I think it's at the tail end. But when those discussions are had, I think we will see a recovery. I just don't know when that's going to happen. So to say a payment would be made in June is, I think, a little bit preemptive. I think we need to wait a little bit. And if that's something that the Finance Committee can negotiate with City of Reno management about when that payment is made, I think that is the most advisable plan going forward.
The only thing I just wanted to clarify two things. One, Shannon, to your question, I wasn't committing to the payment in June. It was to take it up to understand what flexibilities we'd have and then make a determination. That's the first thing. The second point I want to make is, and I'm not, very familiar with this public entity budgeting process, but what I will tell you, which the Finance Committee went through in great detail, as some of the other members had referenced, we project, based on pretty draconian expectations, that we're going to wind up the calendar year, I believe it was, and Robert, you can correct me, but we're going to wind up with well over $2 million of cash in the bank. And so, the idea of this incremental $50,000, if people believe, as I do, that this is an important investment for the future business we're hoping to bring into this area, we have the money. It's a matter of, is it a high enough priority in the board's mind? That's my view of it.
Okay, so let me take a stab at this. The board has given the authority to the Finance Committee to make financial decisions during this time. And I think for the 4 individuals from this board that serve on the committee with the executive team from the RSCVA are very intelligent and very versed on our current budget and where we need to do based upon the discussion of the layoffs that they've made thus far. If the board makes it or decides so that we should go forward with the funding, we should allow the flexibility to the Finance Committee to make those decisions when they see fit for the RSCVA to make those payments. Counting on a $50,000 payment now, and then another $50,000 payment when available by the decision based upon the Finance Committee. Is that something that would be acceptable by this board?
I agree with that.
Okay, so we're going to amend Don's motion to be that. Is there a second to that motion?
Mark Sturbins, I'll second.
Okay, I have a second from Mayor Sheevy. I heard Mark Sturbins. Mr. Sturbins, do you have a comment?
No, I was just going to second. I think it sounds very reasonable.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Now, before I take a vote, I do have to disclose.
Discussion point, Bob.
Okay, Ed, go ahead.
So keep in mind, and I know the rest of the board wasn't there, but we started off our conversation as the Personnel and Finance Committee as us running out of cash in November, December of this year. So we didn't come to these cuts just because we thought it was the right thing to do. We came to it out of sheer terror that we were going to run out of money. And we're, to Mr. Kornstein's point, we're going to end up with $2 million in January or in December, but we're starting with $13 million. We're burning cash at an unprecedented rate for this organization. So I'm not opposed to it. I see the investment part of it, but I think now we got to start looking at some other services we got to cut. and some professional services that we may be getting right now, that don't be surprised if your contract is not going to be renewed, because every dollar in my mind makes a significant difference.
I thank you, Vice Chair Lawson, and I think that that is a prudent point. And I think that what we're discussing is that obviously giving your committee the ability to make those decisions and entrusting that power into your committee to make those very difficult decisions in support of the board. And I think your commentary is timely in the sense that realize $1 to another pot may be $1 from somebody else. So with that being said, we do have a motion from Mr. Kornstein, a second from Mayor Sheevy. The motion on the floor is to pay $50,000 to the Business Improvement District immediately, and then leave the additional payment up to the Finance Committee when available in the next period of time. So, and before we take that vote, I do have to disclose that just because I participate in the executive committee of the BID, it does not affect my decision, and I am still permitted to vote in this, and I will leave that there. And if Mayor Sheevy, if you want to make that disclosure too.
Chairman, I'm not on their board.
Yeah, you're not on the board, and so
for the city of Reno? Yes,
yeah,
I'd like
Neil
to.
McJarden is, and so I think it was probably misstated that you sit on the executive committee by the chairwoman, but it is Neoma Jordan that is your representative, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
All
you.
right. I am the only one that sits on that executive committee, but I still feel it's in my power to vote on this organization. So I will call for the vote at this time. If you'd like, I will do a roll call vote. So Madam Clerk, if you'll do a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Mr. Caraselli.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Kornstein.
Yes.
Ms. Keel.
Yes.
Mr. Lawson.
Yes.
Mr. Lucy.
Yes.
Mayor Sheevy.
Yes.
Ms. Silver.
Yes.
Mr. Sturbins.
Yes.
All right.
Vote is unanimous.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Ms. Carano and Mr. Tolles, for participating, and interim manager Soto and Matt and Chief Vincent. We appreciate you coming and participating in this conversation. All right, we have lots of business to cover, folks, and we don't have a whole lot of time. We've kept you for an hour and 20 minutes thus far. We are on to item E3. This is the selection of search firm and procedure for hiring the president and CEO. Currently, last meeting, the board of directors had asked that we go out to RFQ for a search firm to help find a selection group to identify and recruit a potential president and CEO candidates for the board to review. That was submitted. We opened that RFQ for a period of time. That was under the direction by the board to our board member, Andy Chapman, who worked directly with Robert Chisel to do that. Ms. Cunningham, I would like to make the disclosure that Ms. Cunningham did not participate, showing that her interest in applying for the job. And so we did receive a number of responses from individuals, and I apologize about not looking at the camera, but I'm looking at my computer. We have a number of individuals that did submit responses, and those responses were given to you by Mr. Chisel in a matrix. And with that, Mr. Chisel, if you want to walk us through those applicants, or actually, no, I'll take care of it. I found it here. Never mind. I apologize. So I have the applicants here. We did receive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 applicants All those applicants did have experience enough to submit for the RFQ. And at this time, what I would do is have the discussion with the board in regards to the qualifications and experience of all 8 of these organizations. What I would like to hone this down to is eliminate, obviously, as many as possible, and probably narrow this to 2, and then take a vote to move forward at the end on one organization. And being provided we can take this in form of 2 votes. So Ms. Carlson, if you're here listening to this, I probably will take this in 2 voting patterns that we will narrow this down to a second vote of 2 organizations, and then from there narrow it down to 1. So with that being said, I'm going to open the discussion for the board to discuss the, and what I'll do is actually go to Mr. Chapman. He's been involved with this immensely from the start. So Mr. Chapman, do you have any comments?
Thank you. For the record, Andy Chapman. Yeah, and I want to thank Robert and his help in putting the RFQ together. I think when you look at the different proposals, we've got a little bit of a wide variety. I think we have from a rate standpoint, a low of 24,000 to a high of 100,000. So quite the spread there. I'm sure all the board has looked at the information directly. And I think, in my opinion, there are 2 clear leaders of what I think have the most direct experience within the CVB world, and that is Searchwide Global and Korn Ferry. There are a couple other ones that certainly have dabbled in some of it as well, but a few of them are more associated with learning institutions, universities, cities, and municipalities and others. So at least from my perspective, looking at it and looking at all the detailed information, I would say our top 2, at least at this point for me, would be Korn Ferry and Searchwide.
This is Shannon Keel. I would agree with Mr. Chapman.
Okay. All right, any other comments from any of the board members in regards to this? Mr. Korenstein, you did definitely have conversations with Searchwide and were intimately involved previously. Do you have any comments?
Well, I agree with the assessment and the 2 firms. I happen to know the woman that runs the group at Korn Ferry, just in the context of full disclosure. And as I mentioned in the last board meeting, when I was putting Searchwide Global forward, they came highly recommended from the meeting group at Caesars. I have, no prior relationship there. So to me, I think whichever one we pick will serve us well. There's no guarantee in how this process goes, but I think the way I would suggest whoever we decide to go with, we make it very clear that our upfront money is limited, and really the balance, the bulk of the payment would come upon success. And on that basis, whether we want to, I don't know if people have a preference, but to me, I'm not sure why we would spend $25,000 more with Korn Ferry. But if people think Korn Ferry is the right firm to go to, I have no problem going back to them, or somebody can go back to them and give them the opportunity, subject to reducing their fee. I think the other thing it should be noted is they're working on the airport search, and they brought this fee in line with what I believe they're charging the Reno Tahoe Airport, the $100,000.
Thank you, Mr. Korenstein. All right, any further discussion by the board?
Yeah, Chairman.
Mayor Sheevy.
I would like to ask, okay, what's the cost of both of those firms?
So currently, Searchwide Global is offering a fee of $75,000. That would be divided up in segments, $25,000 up front, and I think negotiable on the end of that. Korn Ferry is $100,000 for the total. Also an upfront fee, negotiable, and what the completion is. I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry, I need to pull it up. But both of those do have an upfront fee, I believe, of $25,000 each. But Corn Ferries is $100,000, where Searchlight is a $75,000.
Okay. I'm gonna ask for board discussion here.
Okay.
Let me just give you a little background, because I'm involved in all these searches almost on every board right now. You know, and we've had lengthy discussion today on how we're spending money, how we're going forward. I think Councilman Lawson brought up, you know, some good points about finances. And it leads me to the next idea that, you know, you are seeing right now, certainly at the city of Reno, even on the school board with Kristen. I'm not so sure that we should hold off on a search firm. And the reason I'll tell you why is we don't know what the landscape is moving forward of, you know, what we're dealing with, of the effects of, you know, COVID-19. And one of the reasons why we chose Chief Soto is that, and Kristen as well, and you're seeing it in this environment because they have the relationships, they know the landscape. Our working structure is much different. We have different ways to navigate. And I would just say that, you know, Jennifer Cunningham was in that position before. She did an amazing job. Our numbers were never better. She brought in BBK. She, you know, innovative, but she also knows the landscape. And again, we're going to be dealing with different types of challenges. So I would like to even propose, maybe we put Jennifer in as that position for a year and then go back out and see what it looks like. We might have a different criteria of a CEO coming out of this. So I'm just asking the board for discussion, but that would be where I'm going to Councilman Lawson's point with, you know, spending the money. So I appreciate his comments, but I'd like to open it up for discussion to see what the thoughts are with the board. And first of all, I want to say, I really appreciate Mr. Chapman and Shannon for, you know, doing the hard work. I really appreciate it. It's just that as we roll out with COVID-19, it's changing daily about how we operate. So it's been really interesting. And what happened last week has changed to this week. So all I'm just saying is, I think the rules that we might have went by before, moving forward, I think all the rules, especially in government today, are out the window. I mean, we're finding different ways to navigate this whole system. I mean, it's crazy. So that's all I would say. So thank you. And again, thank you to Mr. Chapman and Shannon and Ed Lawson on this. I appreciate it.
Just for clarification, I'm sorry, I don't want anybody to think, I really didn't, Madam Mayor, I didn't really do a lot of work in this. Like, I gave my opinions and I've had conversations, but I don't want anyone to think that I put in a bunch of work on this.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it because I think, you know, we went in this direction because you guys were willing to step in and do work. So I appreciate you.
All right, I'm going to open it up, and I think the mayor is right. We need to have an open discussion about this in regards to what our leadership looks like in regards to coming out of this pandemic. And so I'm going to open this up to the board members right now for that discussion to see what the willingness is of the board to move forward. No?
Go ahead, Don. Go ahead, Don.
Okay. Mayor, I respect your opinion and I understand the focus on the budget, but I believe we really will benefit by going through this process. And I believe it's a good use of money to find out the quality candidate that we might be able to find. Might turn out we don't find anybody that's suitable for the board, but then we've learned something in that process. We probably have learned many some things in that process that might cause some reflection and, you know, some other changes that occur. But we're in a dynamic environment now, and I believe bringing in an experienced person that has had success, if we're lucky enough to find that person, in another environment that will be a change agent for how things have always been done in the RSCVA, could be quite beneficial.
Mr. Cornstein, I'm going to stop you really quick.
Yeah.
You know, and one thing, because I made the disclosure that Ms. Cunningham was interested in applying for the position, I think it's prevalent that I'm going to ask Ms. Carlson to mute or disconnect Mrs. Cunningham for the time being so that she's not part of this conversation, to not give her, I don't want to give her, put her in a place, an awkward position that she may have to discuss later on. So Ms. Cunningham, if you don't mind, I'm going to disconnect you from the conversation, then bring you back in once this conversation is done. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I'm happy to jump off the call since
I will text you as soon as we're back on to normal agenda.
And I'll sign on.
Thank you.
And Chairman, I should just probably note that, you know, I have not had any discussions with Ms. Cunningham on this, so I want to just be clear. I mean, she might be like, oh, you know, absolutely not.
No,
and I agree.
No, she's voiced. No, I understand, Mayor, and I think she's voiced. I think she's voiced it to me and a number of the staff and a number of the board members many a times that of her interest in the position. So I just think it's at this time to protect her and protect the board and the organization. I think
and I appreciate this. Yeah, and I guess I just want to clarify. I don't want to put her in any uncomfortable, you know, situation.
Agreed. Thank you. I appreciate that. So with that, Mr. Cornstein, I apologize. I stepped on you.
Right. So I think we can learn a lot in this process. I want to remind people of, and it was a little overwhelming getting 8 decks, I would say. I'm speaking for myself. But in the Searchwide Global proposal, just to refresh people's memory, the founder of the company and then one of the 3 people that would be part of the assignment have actually run organizations like this. They're very experienced in this area, but they've actually run these kinds of organizations. And so they're coming in to begin the search would be their, you know, an initial investigation and a set of responses, reactions, thoughts regarding how the RSCVA is organized. So to me, we're kind of getting a consulting project inside of a search project as well. And so I just think we have very little downside. And again, this is an investment in the future of this organization. And I think taking a fresh look as part of how this organization is going to be organized and run after this pandemic is what almost all companies are going through right now. And I think it's totally appropriate. So I would be very much in favor of selecting a firm today and getting started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cornstein. Ms. Keel, I know you had a comment.
Yeah, I definitely understand where the mayor is coming from, given the financial situation, the uncertainty and what the landscape's going to look like. I mean, here at GSR, there's some really important positions that we were looking for that we are not anymore. This particular position, because it revolves around sales, and we all know how important sales is and how to get the city and the convention center and everything back on track. And that's our future. I don't know if we can afford to delay in this. And given how messy and all the drama that was going on with you know who, I just think that we need somebody strong to come in and clean up what was happening, which seems like for a long period of time, to finally once and for all get this organization back on track. So I hear you, but I think we have to bite the bullet and do this now.
You know, and I want to make a quick, thank you, Ms. Keel. I want to make another comment. I think one of the discussions that I'd like to add, the narratives, is that Ms. Cunningham, when she was the interim director last time prior to Mr. DeLone taking office, it was a good duration of time. I was chair of the RSCVA at the time and got to work side by side with her. She did do great work. And at that time, we were making a massive transition, but the focus was around marketing and the marketing and the brand and what we were changing. And I think that you're absolutely right, Ms. Keel, that the focus has now changed based upon the new landscape that we're looking at, that sales is going to be our new directive, and that because the brand is great. We've done a phenomenal job, and she has done, and her team has done a phenomenal job of building that brand and a strategic plan around that. However, now we need to go focus on sales and how we re-energize our community and our region. And I think that's going to take somebody who builds a culture. I think that's going to take somebody who can really focus the energy of the sales team and really build an organization around a structure of filling room nights. And, you know, I don't want to steal Nat's thunder, but, you know, heads in beds. We want to make sure that we get heads in beds. And the way we're going to do that is going to make sure that we've got consumer confidence, and that's going to be through a sales team and the structural of that. So just for a little bit of historical information, I mean, that's my perception and my opinion, but once again, the board is the decision maker.
So this is Mark Sturbins. Just have a couple of comments real quick. So I think really in this time, the only thing that's really clear is coming out of this is going to be very, very difficult. And I think we have an opportunity, for a fairly low down payment of $25,000, and then the rest of the fee contingent on them actually finding qualified candidates and a solid candidate at a pretty good price to go out there and see if there's a very proven leader that's going to have some experience that we could really help us come through this challenge. Because I don't think anybody can really tell you when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen, or when social distancing will go away. So there's just a lot of variables that come into play that are going to take a lot of experience from various work in history. And I just think that right now this is a great opportunity to go out there and see what's available, and it's not a huge upfront cost to go see what this firm could bring to us. And so I agree with some of the comments that Searchify Global looks like they're very qualified. The price seems very amenable for the investment that we're looking for, and it's the right direction I think we should to move forward today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sturbins. Any other comments by any of the board members?
Can someone tell me what the pay range is going to be that we're going to go out with?
Ms. Rizak, can you answer that question, please?
I think Mr. Chisel or Ms. Neal could tell you what Mr. DeLone made as he ended, but it was around, I believe, $225 to $250. I don't think the board has indicated what the salary range it would like to see a new CEO coming in at yet.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rizak.
So
I'd like to add a comment to that.
Hold on, Mr. Grunstein.
Okay.
Just based on 250,000, 75,000 would be 30%. So I definitely think the 100,000 for Corn Ferry is very high. I've heard very great things from them, but equally great things about Searchwide. But even at the 75,000, that's 30%. And, you pay for what you get, but I also wonder if there's any room to negotiate that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Keel. Mr. Kornstein.
Yeah, so I would just, with regard to what we pay, I would think that we would take input from the firm that we hire, and we can take that input and make a decision. I think right now in the two firms that I've spoken with, Corn Ferry and Searchwide, it's a very good time. And I think to Mark Sturbin's point, it's a very good time to be in the market, because with all this uncertainty, there are people that are going to be looking to lock into an opportunity where they have some security in a multi-year contract. So I think they'll be able to give us a better reading on what it might take to get the right kind of candidate, and then the board or whatever the organization would be can approve that amount of money. And, you know, Shannon, to your point, look, I don't know what other people's experiences are, but in my world, 30%, 30 or 33% is quite standard. And sometimes it actually is total comp. So it'll include a first year bonus, which this obviously doesn't. And, you know, DeLone's contract, I think, gave him, I don't know, 40, 50% bonus of his base or something like that. So I would rather see us put more, allow them to keep the 30%. And look, you know, I'm a believer, you don't get if you don't ask. So asking is fine, but I wouldn't want to lose their enthusiasm. I would much rather say if we hire a person, they'll get the balance of the money. Do you know what I mean? So that the real risk is 25,000. If we don't hire anybody, that's all they get. And they would have spent a bunch of time and, you know, some other money if that's acceptable. That would be my thought.
All right.
I assume that was what it was going to be set up as. Was that not the intent?
Well, it's about they had an interim payment, but I think they would negotiate the interim payment. I just think, you know, in this environment, I mean, we could ask them if they would take less than 30%, but I think if you're asking them to take 1/3 down, 2/3 upon success, it might be hard to get, especially remember, they did have an experience with the RSCVA, which had been documented in a local press.
So, okay, so I think before we get into details on any specific organization, what I'd like to do is I think from what I've heard, unless there is any kind of opposition from the remainder of the board, is that at this time we were considering Korn Ferry and Searchwide as the only two viable options for our search firms. Is that what I'm hearing from across the board? I'm going to listen for any opposition to that.
Hey, Chairman, I'm back on.
Yes,
Did you know that I bumped off?
No, I'm sorry. We lost you. I'm sorry. I didn't know you hopped off. I apologize.
So I apologize. I did not hear any of this discussion, literally when, right after Don spoke.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to reiterate, I agree with him. I think we should. I just think right now that this is just where I'm coming from. That everything is so dynamic and it is changing. I think everyone makes, you know, some great points. And I definitely would like to move forward, but I want the board to know where I'm coming from when we're having these extensive discussions about finances. But I also agree that, you know, we do the search at a later date. But like I said, I just jumped on and I caught the last end of it. So, you know, I'll support the board in whatever direction they want to go. But you know, just my experience lately is, you know, a lot of these different boards are really going with inside someone that knows the dynamics of the community. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Sheevy. I appreciate the commentary. And I think just to catch you up for the stuff that you may have missed, you know, Mr. Korenstein and Ms. Keel and Mr. Sturbins all voiced their opinion in regards to the search firms and not necessarily, I think their support for the search firms. And I think what we've clarified at this point so far is that Searchwide and Korn Ferry would be the only two search firms that we would look at as search firms. So I'm looking for now opposition to from anybody else on the board that we would consider Korn Ferry or Searchwide as the two firms.
Mr. Lucy, Ed Lawson here.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
You know, I think it's important that we go forward with this. As Mr. Kornstein said, you know, we're getting an evaluation of the RSCVA with this. This also will help us determine our pay range for a CEO. I think there's more benefit to it. It's also going to be, you know, more incumbent now upon the Finance and Personnel Committee to scrub out another, looks like $200,000, you know, so 100 for Reno and then 100 for the search and possible hiring. So I think we can do that as the committee. So in confidence, you know, that we can meet everybody's needs, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. I appreciate it. Any other comments? All right. Okay, seeing that we've kind of narrowed down the firms to consider Corn Ferry or Searchwide at this time based upon their experience and cost. We will exclude the other 6 search firms from the discussion at this time, and move to what I'd like to see as a motion so that we can move on. We are now an hour and 50 minutes into this meeting. So is there any further discussion? I think we've had pretty extensive discussion about the 2 firms.
So at this time, is it appropriate to just throw out a firm's name and get a motion?
Yeah, I think that's what I think that's probably, that's where I was going. So.
Oh, all right. Then I'm going to give you a motion. Let's go with Searchwide.
Okay. I have a motion from Searchwide for Mayor Sheeby. Do I have a second?
Second, Andy
I
Chapman.
have a second from Mr. Chapman. I have a motion and a second to allow Searchwide to continue our search. And
Mr. Chair, can I jump in here real quick? I just want to make clear what we're agreeing on. So I've heard some discussions of the Searchwide proposal that I don't know that the financial aspect is clearly understood. So Searchwide's proposal is a search fee of 30% of the first year's salary with a minimum fee of $75,000. That's payable $25,000 up front, $25,000 at 30 days, and then the balance upon hiring or discontinuance of the search. So if we retain Searchwide, we pay them the first 25, it goes on for a month, we decide not to proceed. Their proposal is that at that point we pay the full 75. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, and if we want to try to negotiate a different financial arrangement, that we address that now.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
I think, Ben, I think we were talking about revising that. That was their proposal, but we were talking about revising it where we would not have that interim 30-day payment.
Agreed.
So this is what I would propose based upon the discussion that we've had thus far, is that we select Searchwide and direct Mr. Chapman, who is, as long as he continues to agree to this, to help negotiate a new or a decreased fee maybe, or a different fee or arrangement for the organization in conjunction, being that he sits on the finance committee. I think it's prudent that he have that discussion, understanding the budget and what we have available to us, and move forward with that understanding, and have a report from him in regards to maybe negotiations at the next board meeting. Mr. Kennedy, would you be amenable to that type of a motion?
Yeah, I want to be clear then. That would mean we're selecting Searchwide. There'll be discussions over the course of I think our next board meeting's 3 or 4 weeks. And then at that next board meeting, we would bring forward the agreed upon financial arrangement. And then at that point, we would execute the contract and Searchwide would commence the search.
Do we need 3 to 4 weeks to negotiate price with them?
Yeah.
No. I think we
could. If the board is going to approve it.
I think we can call him today. Why can't we approve this subject to that change? And we can call him literally today. We'll get an answer. Right. Not today. We're going to get an answer tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I don't want to delay this another 3 to 4 weeks based upon board approval for the next board meeting. So what I want to do is clarify. I think the board has agreed upon the 75,000. If we can negotiate that down, we will, and attempt to move forward with that. But I think the board has agreed to the 75,000 at minimum. If we say any savings that can be incurred, we're going to try for. But I do not want to delay this another 3 to 4 weeks.
So then I think the motion is to retain Searchwide,
and execute,
but only agree to the $75,000 is basically a flat fee. We're not paying a third. The 75 is not a minimum; it's the flat fee.
Correct, and that we can negotiate the type of payments at minimum, the 75,000.
I think that motion works, and then I guess the only other thing we need to address is, we're agendized to have you, Mr. Chair, work with legal to finalize and execute that search-wide agreement. So I think we'd want that to be a part of it. So you've got direction on the financial. We can work with you to get that search-wide agreement in place and executed.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So I'm going to go back to the mayor. Madam Mayor, did you understand being that you're the motion, or did you understand the amendments that Mr. Kennedy made? Agree with?
Yes, is the board agreeable?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, and then Mr. Sturbins, as a seconder, do you agree with those amendments?
I don't think I was a second, but yes, I would second it and agree.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. I'm going to call for the roll call vote. Ms. Carlson?
Yes. Mr. Caraselli?
Yes.
Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
Mr. Kornstein?
Yes.
Ms. Keel?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Lucy?
Yes.
Mayor Sheevy?
Yes.
Ms. Silver?
Yes.
Mr. Sturbins?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Carlson. We appreciate that. The motion carries unanimously with all board members voting. And we will move forward with that. Mr. Chisel, I'll be in contact with you and obviously with Mr. Kennedy to move forward with that contract. All right, we are on, ladies and gentlemen, we do not delay this much longer. We are on to item E4. This was a review, discussion, and possible action regarding Oh, Ms. Carlson, can you please call Mrs. Cunningham and inform her that we'd like her to rejoin the meeting, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Chair, Lucy, Ben Kennedy, real quick. Can I interject just quickly here? I know we're trying to get out of here. I think to be able to negotiate the contract with Searchwide, we need to set our expectations as to the number of candidates we expect them to present, because I think that has a great impact on how they conduct the search. And we've talked about this in previous meetings, that the board wants Searchwide to go out, conduct a search, bring back who they, one candidate that they feel is the most qualified. Does the board want 3 candidates? I think it'd be prudent if we could decide on that now, because I think it's important to have that understanding and to enter into this contract with the understanding in place.
Okay.
It's a suggestion.
Can I get clarification, Chairman?
Okay, so previously in the last search, the board did require that the search firm bring forward more than one candidate for suggestion by the board. They brought forward one candidate, and the board felt that that was not enough for of a selection for them, and that we did really want to see multiple applicants and resumes for an interview process. I believe we did that last time in the second round of the process with 2 candidates and for an ultimate vote. However, due to open meeting law, it makes it challenging because all candidates' names would have to be disclosed on an agenda prior to that meeting to be considered. And they would have to sign a disclosure that they would be being considered and discussed in an open meeting. So those are the challenges that come with the process. So what I think Mr. Kennedy is referring to is whether we move forward and have the search firm bring us multiple candidates for discussion, or allow the search firm to narrow down to one candidate for approval or disapproval.
This is Shannon. I think we need to have 2. I mean, I realize with the open meeting that it's going to be hard. I mean, normally you'd like to have 5 or more, but I think if we can say 2 or more, that would be great.
Okay, Ms. Keel voiced her opinion for 2 or more. I would agree with Ms. Keel that 2 or more, and that was the position I took last time. Madam Mayor, do you want to chime in? I know you participated last time.
No, fine.
Okay. Any other comments from the board in regards to multiple candidates?
I do.
Mr.
Well, I understand in normal circumstances, having multiple candidates is ideal, and that would certainly be something I would support. I believe, given this public meeting law, we will not have the same group of people interested in this job because the risk of being in a competition and you're publicly disclosed if you're currently working, and I think we want somebody that's currently working as opposed to somebody who's out of a job. I just think we should think about that long and hard. You know, these are Searchwide is certainly a firm that specializes in this area. As I've said, 2 of the people working on this project have run CVBs in the past. And I think we've got to treat them as professionals and have the trust that they're going to show us the best candidate. Again, I understand why multiple candidates in most circumstances would be ideal, and I would support that. But under these circumstances, I think we're going to limit our candidate pool, and we're not going to get as good a candidate as we can if it's a one-off. And if it turns out that person and we can't reach agreement, they can go to a second person or a third, whatever it might be. I just think it's got to be sequential, or preferably, not has to be. I think it's preferable to have it be sequential if we need to go past the ideal candidate. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cornstein.
Chair Lucy.
Yes.
Andy Chapman for the record. I think that we ought to be looking for multiple candidates as well. And, notwithstanding Mr. Kornstein's thoughts on that, which I think those are accurate, but having present one candidate and either a yes or no, and if it's not a successful candidate, then another and another, that to me tends to potentially prolong it more than we might want to look at. So yes, they have to publicize and it'll be an open process, but it will have to be that for that original single candidate process as well. So I would support and lean more towards a 2 or more kind of arrangement.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chapman.
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
I would support multiple candidates, and let's not forget that Jennifer Cunningham is a candidate.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Silver. All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, Bob, Ed Lawson. So I've been through this before, and I think the public process also scares a lot of people away if you have multiple candidates. And I sat on the last search committee for this. So I'm leaning more towards trusting Searchwide and doing a single candidate.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Mr. Urbans, Mr. Caraselli?
So, but they're not going to be representing Jennifer though, right? So they wouldn't be, I guess I need clarification. Jennifer would not be included in 2 or more, right? Because she's applying internally, or would?
No, if she applies in the pool.
Right.
She would be represented. That Searchwide would now become our representative.
So they would better.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess I'm looking for, I understand it's going to be hard and we can always change it down the road, but I would like to see 2 or more outside candidates.
Okay. Ms. Gill. Thank you. Mr. Caraselli, Mr. Sturbins, do you have any discussion?
So yeah, this is Mark. I mean, I think certainly it would be favorable to have multiple candidates, but I do agree that in this situation, someone having to disclose that they were actively searching for a new position would be very difficult to get, the type of quality candidate we would be looking for. So, I would agree that if the firm has to get paid based on them finding us a candidate, and whether it's the first, second, or third person they bring forward, you could do it one at a time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Nat, and I have no comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Caraselli. All right. Being as Mr. Lawson, myself, and Mayor Sheevy participated in this last time, I watched the demise of bringing multiple candidates forward, and it did provide for some discontent for the applicants. And that was one of the challenges that I had. And I believe that I don't disagree. Why extending it if they could bring us candidates in a timely manner, that interviewing one candidate and whether we give them an up or down, and truly investing in the search firm that we're providing revenue for. I think that we should give them that confidence that they can bring forward the best candidate to us in a timely manner, and knowing that we still have the ability to approve or disapprove that candidate. So I would be in favor, based upon Mr. Kornstein's discussion, of moving forward with a single candidate. So I'll look for a motion from a board member at this time.
Chairman Lucy, just Andy Chapman, one quick clarifying question. If in fact an internal candidate is picked for that, we ought to have conversations through the process with the search firm of whether or not would that qualify for the same payment, equal payment. I know it doesn't necessarily change their structure or their cost structure, but I know looking at some of the past processes, if an internal candidate came out of the process, we didn't necessarily were on the hook for the same fee. I don't know if you guys were closer to that, and maybe you have other insight into that particular question.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Andy, and I'm confident that could get, negotiated. I don't think they would say we'll take zero, but they would certainly take a far lower success fee in the back end for that. So I think that's a good point.
All right. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion at this time to.
I'll make the motion. Do you want me to say? Do you want me to?
Yeah, please
outline it? Okay. Yeah. The motion is to retain Searchwide Global on the financial terms that I'm not going to repeat, with the emphasis on they running the process that they would normally run, and to bring to the board their top candidate for consideration for the CEO's position. That we know that Jennifer Cunningham will be part of that process, and they will include her in their process. And if either one of those are not acceptable, they will provide us another candidate until we either figure out that there's a candidate that we like, that likes us, or we abandon the process. So it might have been a little bit more complicated, but I think the idea is that we're going to trust them to run their process and find the ideal candidate to present to us, and then repeat that if they need to.
Just to be clear though, if two candidates don't mind being presented in open meeting law, they can still present too, right?
Yeah, but that's not the impression I've gotten either from Korn Ferry or Searchwide Global. And
no, understood. I'm just saying.
But we give the search firms the discretion to bring that forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point, Shannon.
So I think based upon what I'm hearing, it is at the discretion of Searchwide to bring forward one candidate at a time. And if they want to bring forward more, it's at their discretion, but we leave them the ability to make that decision. That is the motion that has been provided to me by Mr. Kornstein. Is there a second?
Second that.
I have a second from Mr. Sturbins. All right, Ms. Carlson, we have a motion and a second. Will you call for a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Mr. Caraselli.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Kornstein.
Yes.
Ms. Keel.
Yes.
Mr. Lawson.
Yes.
Mr. Lucy.
Yes.
Mayor Sheevy,
Yes.
Ms. Silver,
Yes.
Mr. Sturban.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think that was provided a lot of clarity for the firm and for this board in regards to the process. All right, seeing no further discussion on item E3, we will, Ms. Carlson, hopefully Mrs. Cunningham is back on the phone with us. We'll move forward to E4. Yes. This is a review, discussion, and possible action regarding existing RSCVA complaint policies and procedures. So this was a request from Mayor Sheevy to be placed on the board from the last meeting. So Mayor Sheevy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I wanted some clarity, and I also wanted to get the board's thoughts on how the complaint process and how we handle that. And I guess, you know, different boards are different structures. We would have to, and I guess I would refer to Ben Kennedy on what that structure is through, what do we call that? At the city, we call it the charter of what that process looks like. And what I mean by that is I have come forward before with complaints, and I'm not sure where they end up, how they get handled, if they're filed. And I feel strongly that the board, if there are any complaints that are concerning to us coming from the executive staff or the board, that they should come to the entire board to discuss those matters based on liability. So I'm just trying to figure out what the process is and how they're handled exactly, because like I said, I with some of those, I haven't seen any follow-up where they end up. And I think the board should have a policy on how we deal with those. Now, I'm not talking about employees, you know, down, you know, through the organization. I think, you know, our staff is very competent. That's why we have them. They're great. They can handle those. I'm talking about the high level complaints. And, you know, if the board feels that they should be notified of those complaints, and again, I think it's about transparency and bringing it back to the board. I think that's what this organization needs, is full transparency on some of the issues, because otherwise with open meeting law, it makes it very difficult. So we have to have a structure in place. I can't be going around and telling everyone about complaints. It doesn't work like that. There should be a policy structure in place that those complaints either come back to the board or there's a different process. And what I mean by that, let's say, you know, and we need that because we didn't have it at the city of Reno. And when we got into issues with, you know, with some high executive level staff, there was not a policy in place, and it put people in a really difficult position, taking complaints to, it could be, you know, your highest level executive that fields those complaints. I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but what I'm saying at the city of Reno, your highest level executive, you know, if you have to complain to them, that and maybe those complaints are including that person, that could be an issue. And I don't think this board does have a policy on that. We finally have one at the city of Reno, and I think it's clear and it gives direction to the executive staff, and that's important. So I think this board should clarify that moving forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sheevy. I appreciate it. Mr. Kennedy, would you please put on the record for us, do we have a current policy that directs for the board policy from our standard, our SOPs that would point out how complaints are driven to the board, whether it's a complaint of executive staff or complaints of a board member, and how those things are handled? Can you please put that on the record for me?
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna defer to staff on the specifics of our policies. Basically, though, sort of big picture, we've got our board policies and procedures which don't address complaints. They address things like how we run meetings, how we set agendas, how we handle committees. And then we have our adopted personnel policies, the HR policies for how complaints are handled and processed. And I don't know that we have a system for what the mayor is talking about, those types of complaints. I don't know that we have a written adopted policy. Something we could certainly put in place. And, you know, I think we could take direction from the board to go put together a proposed policy. I'm sure we could pull from what the city of Reno has done as sort of a model, start there, and develop that type of policy and then bring it back to the board for consideration.
Great points, Ben. I'm happy to get those to you because I think your executive team needs clarification on how they field those or where they go. Otherwise, I think it puts a lot of liability onto this board, just from my past experience of what we've been through at the city of Reno. Thank you, Ben. Great suggestion.
All right, so I think that's a great starting point for this conversation. So what we'll do, Mayor Shivi, if you're not opposed, we'll direct staff to get with City of Reno staff and get those kinds of policies, directives, and bring those back for drafting so that we can place them in our board policies, if that's acceptable to you.
Great, thank you. Or I'm open to any suggestions you guys have, you know, if you guys have policies on your boards or, you know, whatever that looks like, you know, whatever you need. And then Ben, I can just submit those to you, what we've done at the city of Reno, because they have been vetted by our city attorney. And then, you know, I think the board can review those and decide if they work for us. They don't have to be, but it's a suggestion. Thanks.
Okay.
No, I'm happy to take that. And I just want to, just to close the loop, I just want to confirm with Ms. Mill that I haven't spoken out of turn and we don't currently have the adopted policies that we're talking about right now.
Correct. This is Sherry Neal for the record. We do not have a board policy to handle these complaints, only staff complaints.
Okay.
Okay. That being said, we will have the legal staff and Ms. Neal get with the City of Reno staff and get those, and we will put those on for a future meeting for discussion and final adoption into our board policies. I would make that in the form of a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Silver. All right, Ms. Carlson, will you please call the roll call vote?
Yes. Mr. Caraselli?
Yes.
Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
Mr. Kornstein?
Yes.
Ms. Keel?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Lucy?
Yes.
Mayor Shivi?
Yes.
Ms. Silver?
Yes.
Mr. Sturbin?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. The motion carries unanimously. We will bring that back for a future board meeting for discussion. All right. Seeing no further options, items to discuss at this time, business options, we'll move to board member comments regarding anything that board members want to put on a future agenda. Ms. Silver, I see you raise your hand.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I don't have any future agenda items. May I make a comment, however?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
I've been relatively quiet, and I guess I'm still trying to wrap my head around the 10 and 15% reductions of salary for the staff that will remain at the RSCVA. With all due respect to the mayor, whom I greatly respect, and the bid that I work with and have advised, and the ambassadors we've called in the past, I didn't hear any commentary about the $400,000 budget for the bid staff. They're not doing furloughs. You know, it wasn't my place to dig into the weeds. We had 5 or 6 people talking to us about the bid, but I think it's not necessarily that everybody has to do the same thing. And I appreciate that we're giving $50,000 now, and the finance committee will look at things later. But that's a pretty big item, 400,000 or so for a bid administrative staff. That's not inclusive, I believe, of the ambassadors themselves. And yet we've said, let's take 10% from remaining staff and 15% from executives. with no questions asked about what they're doing at the bid relative to their team. So I'm not asking for further discussion. I'm just placing that on the record.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. I appreciate it. Any other discussion or comments by Mayor
Yeah, can I just say something? I don't disagree with Ann. I think that I think it's tricky, and I'll tell you why. Only because it's not up to this board to decide what other other boards are going to do, but I think she makes a very, very good point. And I think, it's certainly worth discussions. And I kind of wrestled with this with other boards, Ann, because, I think while everyone is doing their part, that it needs to be that sort of broad discussion for sure, so that everyone is kind of on the same page and doing what they can to help all these boards make it through this difficult time. So I absolutely support you on that, Ann. I just wonder too, because I was going to bring up the fact, where's SMG with some of the things they're doing? I don't know, but I don't know where we, sort of fit into those discussions, but I think you make a great point. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's only fair, and we're going to talk about doing that at our council, and I think it's important. So thank you.
Okay.
And I appreciate the narrative by everybody, and I think hopefully that will be carried over. And I, as a board member, I will carry that narrative to the BID on behalf of the RSCVA. But I think, if we want to have further discussion about that, we can, and we can put it on the agenda for that second half of that payment, that we asked for some kind of concessions. So I appreciate both Mayor Sheevy and Ms. Silver providing that information. Anything else by any of the board members?
Mr. Chairman, Andy Chapman.
Mr. Chapman.
Just for a future board meeting, as we look at the impacts of COVID-19, and I know many destinations, and us included, are looking at what are these reopening procedures and processes, particularly as they relate around safety and sanitation. And most important, how that gets communicated to our visitors, our public, and our guests. We recently participated in a nationwide sentiment study, and the top element of kind of returning to travel is based around that safety and sanitation of the destination and the communication of that. So I'd just like to ask the staff to put that into their process a little bit on how we're going to communicate that. Obviously, we're going to be taking the lead of the health and governmental agencies, both on a state and county level. But it'll be an arduous process to reopen, and we have to have all of these elements in place and ready to go. And that safety and sanitation communication is going to be critical.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. I appreciate it. Any further comments from any of the board members today? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman, for bringing that up, because it's so important. And I agree that we're going to have a documented reopening plan with health and sanitation procedures outlined. And I don't know if the convention center will have something separate from our third party, or if that will be something that we'd be involved in. But I appreciate you bringing it up, because it is something we failed to talk about, and it's going to be very important.
And what I recommend is that we have SMG participate in the next conversation, and we'll put a board item together for SMG to present about the procedures that they're doing with our facilities and then what their plans are for reopening. And hopefully by that time, we have a clearer understanding of what those reopening procedures look like going into the future. And so we'll put that on the next agenda so that we have a little bit more clarification for everybody. Anything else?
Just a housekeeping matter.
Yeah, Mr. Preston.
If Robert Chisel can call, I would say the 6 firms that didn't make the initial cut, so that they have closure that, this is not an assignment that they're going to get. And I would suggest that we hold off on communicating with Korn Ferry for the moment, just to make sure that we actually get search-wide on the terms we discussed. And then once we know we have search-wide locked down, then I think we can communicate with Corn Ferry, because it would be awkward if we had to go back to Corn Ferry if we told them they didn't make the cut at a later point. So I just wanted to get that housekeeping. Robert, are you okay to respond?
This is Robert Chisholm. We will respond and send them all a letter.
Thank you.
Great. All right. All right. One last time. Anybody have any last comments? All right. Seeing none, I'll close board member comments. We will go to final comments from the public. Ms. Carlson, has anything been submitted to the public comment record via the board meeting during the board meeting?
We have no public comment at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. We appreciate that. So we will close public comment. Thank you, everybody, for joining today at our special meeting of the RSCVA. We will see you next month. Thank you very much. Be safe, everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.